This is the Tom Anderson Show, broadcasting live from the KVNT studios, 7 to 9 a.m., Monday through Friday.
It's a pleasure to have William B. Allen. He's an editor, a scholar. You have done so much. You have a long resume, and it's an honor to have you join our program. And first, I want to get into really the underlying question of why you assembled this collection of essays.
Well, this work, The State of Black America, is intended to bring us up to date in thinking about what the true situation is in the United States with regard to blacks and non-blacks, because we live in a time when a false image is being projected of blacks generally as helpless, dependent victims who have not really progressed beyond the era of slavery. And that's false. And so we wish, first of all, just to investigate the question, because the air is filled. You have heard of the New York Times 1619 Project, and I could name so many other things that keep us constantly focused on the question of what I call racism with a capital R. It's called systemic or structural or institutional and all sorts of things, which distort reality, and which in fact go beyond distorting reality and inject a poison into the veins of our culture by dividing American citizens one from another. And so we thought it was important to have a frank conversation. In the pages of this book, you'll have an actual debate about the situation and the appropriate responses to it.
Over your career, your illustrious career, have you felt this an important topic, or is this something that over the last few years you've centered on more so?
Well, I've spent the last 5 decades warning against what has come to be, namely an intensification of division in the face of the reality of increasing harmonization in society. And I'll give you just one quick story that illustrates the nature of the problem. When I was chairing the Commission on Civil Rights and coming to the end of my term, I met with the Wednesday group on Capitol Hill, and that's the group of Republicans who meet weekly in an informal session. And I gave them an update on the situation in the country and also gave them some counsel about how to talk about and what could be done to deal with the problem of race. At the conclusion of my remarks, and we had exchanged questions and answers, but they, to a person, responded to my request that they speak about this in a candid way by saying, "We can't say that, we'd be called racist." And it's only gotten worse since that, and that was 30 years ago. So over these several decades, we've seen an intensification of the charge of racism being used to stigmatize, cancel, silence, and divide. And that's getting in the way of our acting as a community altogether within the United States for the sake of securing the continuing strength and resilience of the American heritage.
When we look at a Condoleezza Rice, a very thoughtful, intellectual African-American, or the late Colin Powell, of course, phenomenal career, and some say he turned a little bit more moderate, but I valued his thoughtfulness over the years. Or you look at the more prolific Candace Owens, Alan Keyes, the late Herman Cain, Ben Carson's more low-key, but Larry Elder. I mean, are these leaders, are these really famous black conservatives, do you think they're helping shed light on the state of America and how African Americans might consider thinking, or do you think they're harming basically the momentum of black conservatives?
Well, I think it's really less a question of black conservatives. I think all of these folk have made important contributions. But I think something is missing in the sense that our focus on the significant first in different lines of endeavor are deflecting our attention from what's going on among ordinary people. There are two perspectives. One is the perspective from the mountaintop. The other is the perspective from the valley. People at the mountaintop see an undistinguished mass in the valley, and they don't see all the change and ferment that's going on. People in the valley know the life they're living, But they can be influenced by the rhetoric that comes from the mountaintop to disbelieve their own eyes. They listen to their ears rather than their lying eyes, so to speak. But their eyes actually see the truth. They see an America that is undergoing tremendous change, that has experienced enormous progress since the end of slavery, and that testifies to continual progress of ordinary black Americans and ordinary non-black Americans. So that what we're trying to do is to refocus attention away from the headlight or headline exemplars and more on the basic structure of the society itself, where a process of absorption is taking place as American blacks move into the mainstream.
We're going to come right back. Emeritus Professor of Political Philosophy. You can tell he's just that, from the Department of Political Science, and Emeritus Dean of James Madison College at Michigan State University. He is the former head chairman of the United States Commission on Civil Rights, William B. Allen, talking about his latest book, The State of Black America, Progress, Pitfalls, and the Promise of the Republic. Stay with us right here on The Tom Anderson Show.
This is the Tom Anderson Show, broadcasting live from the KVNT studios, 7 to 9 a.m., Monday through Friday.
Professor William Allen with us, The State of Black America, Progress, Pitfalls, and the Promise of the Republic. And we were talking about the genesis of, and his 5 decades. He's been to all the states. He has talked about these issues, and we were getting on to this idea, the notion that there is systematic racism, and is that the case or not? He thinks it not the case in this 1619 project. Professor, but when we look at, and I'm Caucasian, I will say this, and I'm a Reagan Republican, but if I were a black male, I guess, or female, but I'll use my gender, I would definitely have a little bit of consternation, not going way back in time, but at least look, well, or doing that and looking at generally what's happened in America, not so much now, but I might have a bit of bitterness. And I think that I might also have a bit of frustration, but I would like to think I would work hard, whether in the private sector, military areas that I have an affinity, and I would try to make a difference that way. I mean, are you seeing both sides? Are you seeing some that are just bitter and want to advocate in a bitter sense, and others saying, yeah, I'm not really thrilled how my race was treated, but I'm going to make a difference in my own sphere of influence and like what you've done and go forward? Is that fair? Because I do see a sensitivity there. Like if I were black and a cop is nearby and they're giving me the eye, I would think, good Lord, for how many years is this going to occur?
Well, we see this constantly reinforced, and we see opinion polls that tell us that among American blacks at a very high level, 40% and better, you find people who express a lack of confidence in America, a lack of attachment to it, even a degree of alienation. But what we explain in the book is that is a direct result of the rhetoric, the poison I've talked about that's been injected into the veins of the culture through the racism with a capital R rhetoric. Yes, there are racists. There's no question about it. But there is no racism with a capital R. What there is an American heritage that has proved absolutely critical to human progress and the progress of Americans, black and non-black in particular. So that when you run into these despondent individuals who wonder if things are ever going to change, what I say is, what you're seeing are people who are reflecting the influence of a systematic campaign of discouragement, as opposed to what should be done, which is to remind people of all that has been accomplished. So that, yes, I won't deny that you find people who get nervous in the presence of police officers. After all, you hear people talk constantly about being afraid to walk the streets or being afraid of driving while black or similar such things. But those are all inculcated, as it were, through the reverberative effect of the rhetoric, the divisive rhetoric. And so it's important for us to try to get beyond that divisive rhetoric so as to restore self-confidence in the country and in American blacks. As I've said, the key to America's future, not just the future of black Americans, but of all Americans, is black patriotism. And we have to make space for that black patriotism to operate. And we make that space by telling the true story.
Do you think people understand, I mean, the great contributions when I look at like black inventors, the mailbox, Philip Downing invented the mailbox, or Garrett Morgan invented the traffic light. I don't know if people realize did you know the dryer, folks, the clothes dryer? George Sampson invented that in the late 1800s. Or automatic elevator doors. Alexander Miles. I could go on and on and on and on. Folding chairs. John Purdy. I read a story about John Purdy and folding chairs. Every folding chair, you can thank him. There's such a rich history there. Do you think that's as important, or is that too difficult? I know you're going to say it's important, but in terms of our curriculum, how do we get, for instance, your book? Do you think there will ever be a time where your book, The State of Black America, which I encourage people before we end the conversation, will remind people how to purchase, and I'll put it on my Facebook page, the link, and I'm going to buy a couple copies. I was telling the professor that I want to send it to some of my political consultants because my day job is an ad agency and our niche is political candidates. And I want them to read this. But do you think that this could ever get into curriculums in the United States, or would you say maybe yes, but private schools first?
Well, I think it can, and I don't think it has to be restricted to private schools, home schools, charter schools, public schools. The main thing is to get it in conversation. And this book has a debate in its pages. That's the one thing that people need to understand. It's not a one-sided portrait. It shows both sides. You get people arguing that the government interference has been the cause of the problem rather than the solution to the problem. And you get people who say you need more government help. The leading thesis is, of course, and I wrote two of the essays, so I can say that, is that it is not a question of can you help us, but will you let us help you? Because what's at stake is the future of the United States and not just the future of black Americans in the United States.
Makes sense. By the way, when I look at some Robert Bland or Ian Rowe or Precious Hall, how did you contact them? And I don't mean by phone or by text. I mean, like, did you say, hey, I want you to be part of this book? I want you to write something. Did they already have something written? Did they already have an essay in hand? Well, I
drafted a call for papers, a comprehensive call, laying out all the dimensions of the project. And I distributed that very widely among highly reputable people. And these are the people who responded with proposals that suited what we were looking for. So that's how they were selected. They competed with others, and they stood out as the ones who would most helpfully present to the public this case for the state of black America.
Boy. What would you say are the most important areas of black progress and success in America? And then I want to get into how people can purchase, including me, your book.
Yes. I would say the most important area is to recognize that from the beginning when slavery ended, there was extraordinary progress. That in the first several decades, there was no lack of self-confidence or lack of agency. And that took place in the presence of the severest repression. That's when Jim Crow was introduced, trying to put the genie back in the bottle because everyone could see the progress that black Americans were making. And it was also the era in which we saw a doubling of population growth between 1860 and 1890. Phenomenal. An increase of literacy to 50% by 1920. A massive increase in family formation. And this process of progress continued up to the 1940s and 1950s. It has still continued since then, but it's been muted by the prevailing public rhetoric that identifies black with poverty and being helpless victims. Lyndon Johnson declared in 1965, equal opportunity is not enough, which is a way of saying to black people, you cannot do it. So the most important thing we need to do now is to reverse that and say you can do it, to restore that sense of agency, which black Americans in the beginning of the 20th century had and demonstrated through their accomplishments.
Yeah, that makes sense. I also, like today is the filing deadline in Alaska, and I bet in many states, the last day of May, to run for like governor, to run for congressional seats, to run for, certainly here in Alaska, state legislative races, House and Senate. And so I'm seeing a few African Americans running here in Alaska, and that's a growing population, and I would like to see more to that end. And I'd like to see more right of center, because I think that fits the mold. I have friends that are African American that are veterans and former law enforcement, clergy, and they're running, and I'm very happy for that. How do we purchase your book, The State of Black America? What's the easiest way?
You can go directly to the publisher, encounterbooks.com, or you can get it on Amazon.com, and hopefully you will find it in bookstores before long.
I love it. Well, continue your journey, my friend. You've been to all 50 states. We talked about that off air, and I encourage you to keep at it. I'm going to purchase several books today. That's a promise. You'll see that on your system, and I will definitely share the word, and I would love to get you back maybe over the summer. I'll get a hold of Stephen, and you have an awesome PR expert helping you there, and we work together with many, many guests, and we will get you back, and we will talk about what's happening with the elections. And I would love to, I'm hoping Herschel Walker actually wins, and I'd love your thoughts on that, but we're out of time on this interview. I'd love to have you back.
Well, I'll be delighted to come back with you, and you're most welcome. I thank you for the time, and it's a pleasure talking with you.
Absolutely. You too, my friend. Professor William Allen, The State of Black America. We'll post the link how to purchase it. I'm going to do that after the show. I encourage you to do the same. Thank you, Professor. God bless, and enjoy your summer. We're going to come right back. It's the Tom Anderson Show. Good morning.